my body was on a gurney up against a wall, and a nurse was applying a tag on my big toe, indicating the time of death. From what the record reflects, I was actually physically dead for 33 minutes. So yes, on the record, I have died and come back, even though by now I'm sure that record is submerged and hidden because my parents were not told of this incident, and I spent 3 weeks in the hospital, and I insisted on seeing the growth that they had taken out of me, which was about the size of a walnut, and it had 6 tentacles that were coming out from it, and it was green in colored, and therefore, if I had not had the surgery at the time, I probably would have died a few days later because the last and longest tentacle was only centimeters away from my heart. So anyway, I sit up, and the nurse screams and passes out. Fortunately for me, there was another nurse in the operating room because she ran over and pushed me back down because I had not been sewn closed from the surgery that had been performed. They sewed me closed and everything else. Now, I derived validation that this all occurred in physical reality because naturally I asked to see the growth that had been taken from me, and upon my severe insistence, I was actually shown the growth that had been removed. So therefore, I knew for a fact that while this surgery was going on and I was above watching it all go on and listening to everything that was said and all the movements and different cuts and so forth done upon my body, I was very much aware that the growth had been taken out. And then, of course, to see the growth was a validation that that was all true. I then, in turn, once upon I was released from the hospital, my parents were told basically that I had an appendectomy, that my appendix had swollen and needed to be removed, and that was the reason for my recovery in the hospital. However, the surgeon, who was German of nationality, had a practice in our immediate neighborhood, and he basically, after the surgery, folded up his practice and went back to Germany. I guess he was afraid that, even back in that day, which was in 1969, they would have had, the possibility of being sued for malpractice or what have you. And perhaps he just figured that he had learned enough here in the United States that he could therefore transfer back to Germany and help others more effectively over there. Anyway, in addition to that, I asked my stepdad if there had ever been any bills from the hospital, and the only bill that was ever paid through his insurance was the bill for the ambulance that transited me from the house to the hospital. So anyway, that's enough of those details, but the fact of the matter remains is that when I came back into this body, not only was there a tremendous amount of pain from all that had been done to it, but in turn, I was very gifted. In other words, my awareness was very extended, and for a week after the surgery, I was allowed to see the majority of the life, or perhaps being shown the many various assignments that I had, or the various missions that I needed to accomplish and so forth, while I was here on the planet. Now, unfortunately, on the Friday of that week, all of that knowledge was removed. So I know for a fact that we are mortal. I have no fear whatsoever of death, because I know that etymologically and also from a spiritual aspect that we are immortal, that we will not die. We cannot die because we are immortal. And therefore, these bodies, as Teresa has said, are basically puppets, you could say, that are animated by our spiritual selves and controlled by our spiritual selves. And we do, in fact, connect with all kinds of beings on all kinds of different levels or dimensions, which a dimension is nothing more than a shift in frequency or vibration. Just as we cannot see the other side, because again, that is in the 7th dimension, or approximately 4 frequencies or vibrations above in speed or resonance, what we usually experience in this 3rd dimensional world. So therefore, that is why we do not commonly see the other side. So when you go to seek your Akashic records, that is where you're going. You're transiting 4 more levels above where your physical self normally resides, and you can do this. We travel out of the body constantly, but we very seldom remember those voyages or those trips unless we will ourselves to do so. I have studied shamanism, and one of the very grounding methods of shamanism is the fact that you can travel from your body to any dimension and any reality you so choose to visit. Now, of course, that is beyond the substance of your mind, simply because you are not using your mind, you are using your spiritual self to do these voyages, and it is your spiritual essence that is making the voyage, and your body is being maintained on the physical level at the same time that this voyage is being made. I have had several encounters with the extraterrestrials, as I have shared that I was abducted when I was 5. As a result of that abduction, my abilities psychically were enhanced, as well as I became a savant of languages. I could read, write, and speak 14 languages. This, of course, dissipated over time. To this day, I now refer to what I call a universal translator. So in other words, even though I don't speak the languages now, I still have the comprehension of understanding other languages when they are spoken around me at given times, when that knowledge is a necessity per se. And like Teresa, when I was a youth, at the age of 5, I could raise myself through levitation, defying gravity. I could also make other objects float and defy gravity. I could use telekinesis, which is the ability to move objects with your mind. I could also create blue or spiritual fire in the palms of my hands and project that fire to anywhere I so chose. So as you might imagine, being boarded at a Catholic school at the time that this all occurred, they thought for sure I was the son of the devil. Now, I mean, that I can understand because, again, when one is presented with a person that has abilities and gifts that are foreign to their nature or foreign to their understanding because they haven't acquired such gifts or they haven't experienced possessing such gifts, the person does indeed seem very foreign and very odd and does not fit in. And so I was isolated into a library, and the library had hundreds of books that were written in all kinds of different languages, and perhaps this is why I was gifted as a savant, so that in turn I could read many of these books and understand them completely. And some of them were voyages and travels by persons around the world. Some of them were texts in theology. Some of them were texts in various experiences from a philosophical aspect and all this kind of thing. So I gained a tremendous amount of knowledge in a very short period of time. And to this date, I do share with you boldly that if you truly want to know something, all you must do is quiet your mind, pay attention to your breathing, and listen to the inner voice that is within you, because that is the voice of your spirit, and ask very frankly what it is you want to know, and within, depending, of course, what the knowledge is that you're seeking, it will be given to you. Sometimes it's instantaneous, other times it's not. And so, I mean, again, there are similarities of experience between Teresa and I, only in different parts of the country. I am originally from California, and that is where I grew up. I was born in Santa Monica back in the 50s, and so I am currently 65. So while Teresa turned 70 this year, I will turn 66. But I, like her, have done a tremendous amount of traveling all over the country and even overseas to some extent. I have been to Australia, I've been to the UK, and to Europe, and also to Australia. So, yes, there are lots and lots of different aspects and different understandings. And you could say that as you tune up in vibration, you are then allowed to perceive more knowledge that is enhanced by that vibratory rate. So therefore, like she said, we are constantly surrounded by all kinds of beings that we cannot normally see within our human vision, because our human vision is limited to a specific spectrum. However, if you utilize what you are born with and as the spark of the I Am presence, you then in turn can perceive some of these beings that come and go around you. And you can also be taken by them to their spaceships or their planets or wherever they happen to be and wherever they happen to want to bring you. And they will share knowledge with you, because I'm sure that I must have been taught exactly how to use these gifts. Now, I did have a great-grandmother that helped me get a handle on many things that was physically around me while she was in her 90s, and that happened. But, I mean, you know, I was raised from a perspective that, yes, Catholicism, you know, there was First Holy Communion and baptism and all that good stuff. And at the same time, I was being taught Druidism, because this happened to be a tradition in my family that goes back 5,000 years. So the Druidic thought and understanding of things is far more expanded than the Catholic thought, because the Catholic thought teaches of a judgmental God, okay? Whereas, yes, Druidism teaches that there is no judgment, and it is a God and a goddess, a balanced creative source that has created us all and remains within us all, if we would heed turning inward and pay more attention to our higher selves. Now, I also believe wholeheartedly that this divine love, which I have experienced only a few times, or agape as it is referred to sometimes, does dwell within us, and it is the sustaining source of all creation. So, therefore, it is the highest vibration amongst all creation. So, you could say, yes, this would be the 7th vibratory rate, or even higher. From my understanding, there are 26 dimensions, but there could be far more dimensions than that. Just because I have an understanding of them, perhaps by having transited to the same, does not mean that that is the limitation to how many can or cannot exist. I believe wholeheartedly that we are all joined together as one species, as one consciousness, and that we are all brothers and sisters. I also believe wholeheartedly that many of us are utilizing more than just 3 strands of DNA, or 12 strands, or even possibly 15 strands. And again, this has to do with the dimension or vibration in which you exist. If you tune your vibration upwardly, then naturally internally you are bringing into activation more strands of DNA than a normal person might usually utilize. The same is true with the brain. There is a tumor-like gland that exists between the pineal gland and which is, of course, your third eye, which is the ability to see many more things than you normally would with your regular physical vision. But this tumor-like growth is an actual gland, and in the majority of human beings, in their brains, it lays dormant. However, again, if this is activated, then it creates all kinds of hormones and other chemicals that run rapidly through the brain, and of course it changes your electronic signature brain-wise. And of course you have abilities that others may spend years attempting to gain the use of, when in fact all you have to do really is give yourself permission to utilize the same. Now, I'm not saying that this is instantaneous and you can go out tomorrow and decide, well, okay, I'm going to make things instantly manifest, and you hold out your hand and say, well, I want an apple, and boom, the apple appears. I would say that probably going back, maybe 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, when the veil was lifted completely and the world of magic did in fact exist, such as dragons and fairies and elves and all of these things that had been written in books by Tolkien and a few others. Excuse me. That these elementals and so forth do in fact exist and still do exist, but there is a veil. In other words, there's like an energetic covering that separates their reality from ours. And of course, it has to be pierced, or you have to be welcomed into that vibration rate so that in turn you may perceive the same. Now, I know this all sounds kind of fantastic and very creative to say the least.